Welcome back. Now, Africa's growth story is shifting. At the Africa Unlocked 2025 conference, business leaders and industry giants came together to explore how the continent can accelerate investment, boost trade, and turn opportunities into impact. Joining us to reflect on some of the key takeaways is Andrew Mashanda, Head of Business and Commercial Banking for Africa Regions and Offshore at Standard Bank Group. Andrew, thanks so much for your time this afternoon. And let's start there with your reflections. I mean, the conference took place under uncertain global conditions. You know, we have Trump's trade policies and ongoing geopolitical tensions.
Thank you, and good day to all your viewers and listeners at this point. I think the moment actually chose the conference. At the time when we were setting up this conference, we had no idea that we would find ourselves in the sort of situation that we find ourselves in terms of global sort of trade wars and the geopolitical tensions that you mentioned. So to some extent, it helped us position the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement very well with our clients, but also the significance of us creating a continent that is interdependent, a continent that builds on systems and infrastructures to build self-sufficiency in the face of what appears to be fairly difficult sort of impediments in terms of getting our products into the U.S. market in particular, given the tariff regimes that have been imposed on us. It also gives us an opportunity to start really reflecting quite deeply on the role of the African entrepreneur in carving out a new narrative and a new pathway for African businesses to thrive and grow in the market, and the role that Standard Bank, as a group that is well invested across the continent, can play as a catalyst for growth for the continent.
And we'll get into, that story around entrepreneurship and the role Standard Bank plays in a bit. Just talk to me about the interdependentness, right, that we are trying to work on when it comes to the continent. What's the word on the ground? Is the continent ripe for investment? And are different stakeholders ready to work, ready to engage, especially when it comes to the continent's industrialization efforts, infrastructure, logistics, quite key when it comes to, pushing forward the African Continental Free Trade Agreement?
I think it's a reality that our infrastructure continues to be a work in progress. It's real. But we are seeing significant progress that's taking place in the energy sector, the construction of roads. We're also beginning to see quite a lot of shifts that are taking place in terms of African businesses investing across borders. Which is why our role in actually being part of the conversation or the discourse around Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement are significant. Because some of the biggest impediments to growth are not necessarily limited to infrastructure. While infrastructure is important, there are certain regulatory and governance issues that need to be addressed head-on by the African continent. For instance, the non-tariff barriers that we have, getting goods across the borders in Africa, the paperwork, the difficulty of just getting trade to take place. Then you also look at our own internal sort of tariff regimes across different markets, which stand in the way of smooth cross-border trade. So if we can focus with the government as our partners and the other entrepreneurs and business people across Africa to start looking at how we can increase the ease of doing business, we can confirm that Africa is a place that any investor can invest. The clients we invited to our conference are actually a clear demonstration of why we have a very strong investment case for Africa, because these are businesses that have survived and demonstrated a great deal of resilience, even when our markets have gone through wars, they've gone through macroeconomic turbulence, and right now the markets are going through geopolitical tensions, new tariff regimes in the US, and these businesses have demonstrated a tenacity that allows them to pivot their strategies to accommodate and survive the changes that are taking place in the external environment.
And talking about Africa's investment case and its needs, let's zoom in on Standard Bank's role, especially when it comes to being a financier. How is Standard Bank going about addressing some of those capital needs?
I think first and foremost, and often I think it demands that we actually repeat it and amplify it every now and again. Standard Bank is also one of the major investors out of Africa into Africa as an organization. We're the largest financial services organization by assets across the continent. And we continue to believe that in the 21 markets that we have a presence, that we continue to be relevant to the growth ambitions of the continent, given the positioning of ours. So the second point I want to make on that particular issue is the fact that we focus on sectors that are actually driving the growth of the economies across Africa. We've looked at agriculture as a key driver of GDP growth, and we've been funding agriculture from farm all the way to fork. So all the agro-processing that's taking place in between primary sort of agriculture and the production of food and consumables on the other side at the table, Standard Bank has played a role across that entire value chain. And in terms of segments, we've gone all the way from owner-managed businesses all the way through to corporates that are participating in these sectors across the continent. So that's the one thing. The other thing we've done is we've participated quite actively in the work that's happening around the energy sector. We know that the World Bank and the African Development Bank have got a project to get 300 million Africans to be connected to some form of energy source, or to the grid or other forms of energy source. We have an energy sector fund that is actually speaking to that across all the different segments that we serve. So we do have a focus in that area as well. And then I think if you also look at the services industry, we've continued to also partner with the telcos across Africa in facilitating the creation of effective payment systems across the continent as well. I mean, the continent has seen a massive sort of growth in fintechs. I believe we have over 5,000 fintechs on the continent and 9 unicorns. And more significantly, 4 out of the 9 are coming out of Nigeria. And there's some that are coming through from East Africa as well. But the reality is we've got an economy that's growing, and as an investor and an financial intermediary and the largest financial services organization across the continent, we believe we've remained relevant to the key sectors that are driving the narrative on Africa's growth.
And at the conference, Andrew, there was focus on, small to mid-sized businesses, particularly family businesses and the potential they have. Talk to me about that when it comes to, further unlocking the economic potential within the continent.
I mean, our Chief Executive for Business and Commercial Banking, Bill Black, he spoke quite a lot about the value that's been created by family-owned businesses across Africa. If you look at what's happening in East Africa, how the East African families are well invested across East Africa and now moving into Central Africa, we've seen it with the West African entities also moving across onto the rest of the continent. So family-owned businesses have been a significant driver of African growth, and they are a focus area for us in terms of just making sure that we help them build resilient businesses, that we ensure that we create platforms for them to have very well calculated intergenerational wealth transfers from one generation to the next, and that they remain resilient even as they change leadership within the family structures. So it is a focus area for us. We believe that family-owned businesses will continue to drive the growth within the GDPs of Africa across the different markets across the continent. Yes.
All right. Unfortunately, we have to leave it there. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Taking us through some of your, key takeaways from the Africa Unlocked 2025 conference. That was Andrew Mashanda, Head of Business and Commercial Banking for Africa Regions and Offshore at Standard Bank.